Without further ado, jumping in, and notice on the title page what I had called xtUML Steering Committee. I think the name is going to change, and we'll get more explanation of that later. So on the agenda, we've got a little bit of xtUML Days planning. I want to give a brief update on the work that's happened since our last meeting 2 months ago. But then the bulk of this meeting will be in a discussion on something that we're calling the Shlaer-Mellor Commons. Super excited about that. And we'll get to that after this brief update on xtUML Days. So I'm just reusing a couple of slides from last time, not going to spend as much time on them. But xtUML Days is coming up October 27th, and we've got a theme, we've got speakers, and I'm going to need help in promotion. And let's just briefly review some of that. The theme listed here is it's open. It kind of depends on the topics for the presentations that speakers submit. But we are encouraging a little bit less of an eclectic corner Shlaer-Mellor-ish conference, and encouraging a wider audience participation. And so here's a list of example themes, and some of these talks are coming in. I'll mention that here in a moment. Yeah, so speakers already lined up: Leon Starr, Niels Paulsen, Alistair and John from the software improvements team, Mike Lee and Emily as part of this Commons are likely to have a presentation. Levi from Rogo Agriculture has continued to do work employing Shlaer-Mellor in the field. He wants to give a talk. I've got an intern at one of the UK mill arrows that I'm trying to talk into giving a presentation. So then we'd have a young voice there and new experience with Shlaer-Mellor. And then there's still room for other speakers, but it's time to draft an abstract and send me a note and get that under consideration and get that scheduled. We're probably about halfway filled up with speakers so far. Format is going to be much like last year. It's going to be Zoom with the live and recorded mix that we had worked very well last year. Again, the emphasis is less eclectic, a bit more workshoppy. And in fact, back to the speakers topic, I really would like a couple of basic talks, a half-hour how to do successful Shlaer-Mellor class diagramming, and maybe a how-to on Shlaer-Mellor state machine building would be something that would, it's a useful review for everybody, but especially with newer modelers, is just kind of focuses on our core. So promotion, the people in this steering committee and this group, I'm going to lean on heavily to leverage connections with universities, and we've made the registration fee low enough that we can even sponsor students and young people to join, on a case-by-case basis. Planning some physical gatherings. I don't have a plane ticket yet, but I do have on the calendar the 2 weeks following the conference. I'm going to be in Japan. And so we'll have a physical gathering in Japan. And so I'm expecting in the week ahead of the conference to be in the UK and organize and host a physical gathering, some food, some drinks, and some fellowship in the UK as well as Japan. And again, the date is October 27. It'll be kind of an all-day UK time, kind of a 9 to 5 UK time framework. And so that makes it a little bit tough for people in California and a little bit tough for people in Australia. but that's the nature of a worldwide conference. Last time we had Leon foreshadow a little bit about his keynote and what he's thinking. He's lining up. He even has some colleagues that are getting involved. So excited about that. Thoughts or questions on the xtUML Days planning? So get involved, recruiting, and then for some of you that should probably be preparing a presentation, be doing that. At the end of, well, during last meeting, I took some minutes and then I kind of pasted them in here to give a feeling for how the steering committee meeting ended last time. And what's interesting to me here, to let me highlight before we move on to the primary Shlaer-Mellor Commons presentation, is that I invited like 30 people to come to an ad hoc xtUML steering committee meeting, and something like 25 of them actually showed up. And there was lively discussion, a lot of good ideas, and since then, a huge amount of activity. One of the key minute items that I recorded last time is that we need to better leverage our volunteers in the community. It's like, stare it, we love you, we love hearing you drone on and on, but you can't do everything. And so let's distribute the wealth here a little bit. And that is exactly what is happening, and it's super exciting. And you'll see details of that here in a moment. Okay, I'm going to switch presentations now. Okay. Excited about xtUML Days, but there's kind of a bigger thing happening, and we're calling it the Shlaer-Mellor Commons. And after the last meeting, like I said, there was just a groundswell, a flurry of activity. I think the point man on that was probably Rob Day. He contacted Mike Lee, got Emily hooked in. I think that Rob has he's not just a technical modeler, but he's also, perhaps a psychologist or something, but he's interested in and understands communities and the mechanics and governance of pulling a community together. And so before he went on holiday, he got some activity going that has just snowballed since then. And so we're learning about community building, bodies of knowledge, how to manage and govern that. And we've begun to do that here. So let me kind of go back a little bit before we get to defining the Shlaer-Mellor Commons. This community, the Shlaer-Mellor community, has a heritage, and it started with Stephen and Sally and their associates defining a method, writing some papers, publishing a few books that became foundational and were picked up in industry. It was fun. I got to be along the way pretty early in those days in industry, and as a practitioner of Shlaer-Mellor modeling, reading those books, understanding that we kind of have a better way here, and having some success, especially in my career in the embedded control arena. This methodology took off. Then we have tools, and this was great. So now we have automation. We can actually apply the method in some reasonable way other than just paper and pencil. These tools were expensive, and so it provided a means for some of the experts in Shlaer-Mellor to actually make a living. And so tool vendors and companies sprung up around the method. This also had the side effect, though, of some some kind of splitting of the community among camps, kind of developing around the tools. And this ended up with some differing interpretations of the method. I've had some really interesting conversations with people who grew up in the Kennedy Carter dialect of Shlaer-Mellor and those with the project technology dialect of Shlaer-Mellor. And it's a truth that the tooling actually influenced the method and the application of the method in some of these times. And the fact that we could make a living building and selling tools caused there to be competition among these camps. Then enter the standards committees. Now, this is not an altogether bad story. Looking back, it was complicated and messy, but the object management group, the unified modeling language standards committees came into being, the model-driven architecture. And so the Shlaer-Mellor community not only adapted to these standards, but actually were heavily involved in trying to influence the standards committees to maintain some sanity and going forward. I know that several members of the community, including Stephen himself, sat on these standards committees trying to push them in the right direction. And meanwhile, the tooling and the businesses and the competition continued, in the various camps. Now, in recent days, so come to today, and I'll say recent days being the last 8 or 9 years maybe, we have seen continued success of the Shlaer-Mellor method in isolated teams, all around the planet. The commercial, proprietary, licensed software tooling for all of software development tooling has faded, and more popular now is the use of open source software, open source software for development tooling, and so then people who are trying to make a living are selling services around these open source software tools and methods, and that has continued and has grown as the tool vendors and the proprietary licensing kind of faded away. And so coming from that, here in the last several years, we've learned the specifics of some of these dialectical differences between the different Shlaer-Mellor camps that had grown up around the tooling. And we have a need to address those differences and understand what we're going to do. My favorite, just simple example of one of these differences is that Kennedy Carter heritage and project technology heritage differ on the behavior of a polymorphic event. And so we're now at a place where we can talk about that openly, perhaps make decisions, nail down questions on the method. And part of the excitement from this community is what I describe as the converging of the camps, while simultaneously seeing an abstracting out of the essence of the Shlaer-Mellor method, kind of outside and above the various tooling that has existed. And plus, people are just in this community are enthusiastic about what we do and would like to see this community grow and thrive. And so there's a desire for that. I think there's also a desire for the camaraderie among like-minded individuals in this particular development community. And that has resulted in some successful annual conferences. The xtUML days has kind of been a catalyst to help pull this to the point where we are now. So what does the future look like? Well, the future is kind of happening here in the last couple of months. It seems to be taking shape. And what has emerged is something called the Shlaer-Mellor Commons. And when I say commons, I'm speaking very specifically of the concept of a shared community with a shared set of property, and the community acts as stewards of this shared property. You can think of a neighborhood community garden. You know, in various countries and neighborhoods, you'll see a situation where there's an empty lot or an easement that somebody had the bright idea, hey, I'm going to plant a garden here. And then other people in the community, you know, kind of lay out their small plot and make a garden. And then they start cooperating and having rules about how much land each person is allowed to garden. They might share a common tool shed on the property, even share tools such that not everybody has to own a rototiller, and even go so far as to cooperate and collaborate on what they grow in their gardens, so that we don't have everybody growing tomatoes and nobody growing peppers or something like that. So we have a Shlaer-Mellor Commons where we have a community that are stewards over some common property. That common property includes repositories of open source software, books and literature, even communication media, just a number of things that we share in common. And if we look at it explicitly, we might be more successful at organizing these. And so thus, I bring you the Shlaer-Mellor Commons, which is born kind of today. Working with Michael and with John and Emily and some other people have seen it. I've written down a few just core values and kind of a mission statement. And so this Shlaer-Mellor Commons is going to exist as it says here, to foster collaboration, camaraderie, advance the method modeling and tools, and have fun while we're doing it. And then, organize ourselves to grow the community so that other people can see it and participate in it more easily. Our values are, number one, productive collaboration over competition. Kind of like, as I took us through our history, we're in a different place now. And so collaborating around the common property that we have and taking an open source approach to it is the way forward. We'll value openness and participation. We'll draw as many people in and use as much of their time and energy as we can. That is kind of encapsulated in the term meritocracy. Strong contributions by members of the community increase their influence over the community as well. We value a single method, but multiple tools. And one of the nice things that we're in a position to do now is that as the tooling has come out more in the open, we can talk about a common method between those tools, and even the tooling serving as input into the methods discussions, because there's no better place to try a new feature that might be worthwhile in the method than to prototype it in tooling. And we identify our audience primarily as Shlaer-Mellor practitioners all around the world. We've kind of had a stronghold in the embedded software community, but that's growing as there's now cloud-based and just a different world in which these modeling techniques apply equally well. And we also have as an audience educators, schools, as well as corporate educators. Okay, how is this organized? And I'm going to stop talking here in a minute, and Emily and Mike and John are going to talk about some of the key pieces, but let me establish just a bit of a framework first. So the first team that we need is a community team. You know, how do we just govern ourselves? How are we organized? How does all of this hold together? And Emily's going to talk about that quite a bit more here in just a moment. We've identified 3 core method teams, 2 which we've actually kicked off recruited leadership for. The first core method team is, we call it the OOA team, and it is going to focus on the Shlaer-Mellor method, where it needs clarity, where it needs extension, and basically pick up where it was left off in the literature of the past, not rewriting it, but just making it more clear and addressing discrepancies, et cetera. We're finding there's a ton of sources of information to get this going. The second core method team is, we're calling it the RD team, Recursive Design Team, just kind of using a heritage name. John Wolfe is agreed to at least be initial leader for this. And the key here is, and John's going to talk about it more, but what tools are available and what's the state of those tools. Then we're going to need some process management as well. And a couple of other teams are external facing teams. So we say we want to grow the community. Well, we need some promotion and communication and education and training. And we don't have a team leader identified for these yet, but we have some people expressing interest, and there's going to be room for anyone who wants to be involved to be involved. So kind of the last couple of months and then culminating today is a bootstrapping of the commons. And I want you to be enthusiastic that something has happened, but I don't want you to feel left out or falling behind. We're going to move forward with some flexibility, and we're going to recruit and encourage people to be involved. But this initial effort kind of serves to break us free and get us moving. We've kept to simple names that are kind of based in the heritage of our method. Those can change and adjust as we go forward. Your input and participation is expected and certainly coveted and welcome. One point with operational infrastructure, even in our meeting 2 months ago, I immediately, as a computer scientist, started thinking, okay, what communication channels are we going to chat on? Where are we going to store our stuff? I just started asking a lot of mechanical questions, and we're going to answer those. But one of the key strategies we're going to do is that we're not always going to start from a clean slate. And so if we have something that can serve, like if we have an issue tracker, or if we have some software in a repository that's already there, we're not going to throw it away and move it into something new right away. We'll use what we have to begin with. And I can understand that may be uncomfortable to begin with, but I'm gonna ask that you hold your nose and bear with it until there's something better that we can replace it with. And just kind of out front, some of this stuff may be xtUML and Bridgepoint branded a little bit to begin with, but as we pull things together, we'll be able to kind of rally under the common Shlaer-Mellor theme. And we'll be nimble, and we'll make changes as we go. Okay, I'm gonna pass the microphone over to Emily, and Emily will talk to this slide, and she'll let me know when to click the next button.
Yeah, thank you, Court. So you can see I've taken that triangle from the graphic, that community triangle at the top of that previous graphic. And I've added some details here. So you can see at the bottom here at the base is organization and governance. And on one side, there's channels and platforms, and on the other, data management, with some other things kind of floating around inside at the moment. You can go ahead and hit next. So starting with the base of the triangle, that organization and governance piece. So this piece answers questions like what are listed here. You know, how is it organized? What areas of leadership are there? What roles, what functions are really critical for this community to exist? What are the decision-making bodies and the processes that we need to make decisions? How are we going to address conflicts? How are we going to handle those within the community? And while we're in the process of formalizing what has been up to this point much less formal, what we want to do is strike a balance somewhere between being overly prescriptive and being too squishy with how we define these things. And so this is really about the basic principles that are supporting the values and mission of this particular group. And it's sort of the foundation of how stuff gets done around here. Next. So that next piece, channels and platforms. So you can see on that side the triangle, channels and platforms. And this piece is very, very much about digital habitats and environments, the tools we use to communicate, gather, and move forward with the mission. It answers questions like, what needs do we have? What tools do we already have? How can we integrate them? What else might we need to serve the entire landscape of our community? What is our internal communication like? And what do we share outside of this community? So those things are going to be a little different, and it has a little bit of overlap with that idea around branding, since I'm talking about how we share outside of this community. I just want to point out that I'm really, really grateful to have Rob Day joining me on this team. As Court mentioned earlier, very early in the seeding of the Shlaer-Mellor Commons, Rob shared some really great information about communities of practice, and that information is really going to serve us well as we begin to put these various pieces together. So I just want to take a moment to thank Rob for accepting the call to action to be on this team. Next. So data management, this really speaks to that knowledge base that we're kind of curating. And so this is primarily going to fall into the realm of a curator or a librarian. It's very, very directly related to the mission of the community, and it's kind of crucial for creating that knowledge base. So this leg of the triangle is responsible for the collection, whatever form that takes, the organization, whatever form that takes, and how folks are going to access the intellectual property, the method resources, and also capturing and making accessible the knowledge generated by this community. And so it answers questions like, how do we even identify what belongs in our collection? What resources are most critical to our knowledge base? How do members access it? What data management processes are needed to achieve the mission? What are the really critical pieces of the data and the managing of that data that we need to put in place in order to be effective? Next. So I mentioned before these happy little clouds floating inside of this triangle. These are additional community efforts. For the moment, they're taking a bit of a back seat to the other critical operations, because those are going to help us determine how we're even going to approach things like events and experiences, rules and roles, and branding. And so they're really important pieces for the community team to address. But right now, the community team's imperative is really to formalize the structure that we're going to need in order to make decisions with regard to these pieces. And so how do decisions get made? By whom? The process those decision makers have to follow to support the entire community, these topics in the clouds are represented, but for now, they're not our direct focus. So some short-term goals that we have within this team are to create documentation outlining the preliminary answers to all of those previous questions. We also want to create a set of expectations that are actually going to begin to form the well-defined rules and roles that are sort of rooted within the organization and governance of this particular community that we're building and formalizing. And then we also want to be able to create a map for how new members are oriented into this community so that they can easily join in our conversations and our discussions and be truly welcomed into this community without feeling too uncertain about what to expect and what's expected of them. So those are the goals for this team in the immediate. There's a lot. This is by no means exhaustive in terms of bullet points that go under those bullet points, because we have a lot, there's a lot contained in those main bullet points regarding especially what tactics we want to be able to employ in our governance. And so documenting that, and then also leaving room for us to make changes to that documentation as we move forward and as the needs arise. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Just any questions for, I'm about ready to transition to Mike Lee as leader of the OOA team, but any specific questions while we've got Emily right here on her slides? I want to say thank you to Emily. She has skills that are just completely orthogonal to my skills. And I think Rob Day has some of those skills as well. And so their help here is just really important.
Just interject quickly and following up on that. I really like what I'm seeing here. We've needed this forever. So, I'm happy with the happy clouds. More of that.
You're in your happy cloud right now.
That's right.
Good.
Okay, so the community team is kind of the first team. Then we've got a couple of core method teams, and the first of those is the OOA team, or the modeling team, or the method team. And Mike Lee is enthusiastic about leading this, and I'm glad that he's enthusiastic. He's going to tell us a bit about it and tell us who he's begun to rope into being involved with this.
Thank you, Court. I'd like to second both Court and Leon's appreciation for having Emily on board and looking out after the community, and Rob also in getting all this going. It's just really great. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. The OOA modeling team has, I believe, a very straightforward, if non-trivial charter to provide a forum for maintaining the viability of this method. I think Sally explained this maintenance effort very well in opening the OOA 96 report. I'd like to quote what she said here. She said, since the last publication statement of the Shlaer-Mellor method of the object-oriented analysis, a certain number of questions have come forward. These questions range from clarifications required on basic conceptual matters to detailed inquiries involving extremely fine points of the method. At the same time, as a result of extensive work on client projects, especially those employing the latest generation of Shlaer-Mellor automation tools, we have made some adjustments and we believe improvements to the method. So I'd like to just call out a couple of the items that she brought forward here. First of all, questions or issues with the method naturally occur. No surprise here. That's what we're here to deal with. And they can require a broad range of responses, from either simple clarifications all the way to adjustments or improvements in the method. We should expect the same. And finally, she notes that improvements were especially driven by tooling of the method. Now, this was very early on. The toolings were just starting, but she was recognizing the impact that had and the natural synergy there is, as Court was calling out as well, between OOA and RD. And they can and will inform each other. Okay, so how are we going to go about doing this? Next, Court. Okay, I'm a firm believer in keeping things as simple as possible. So we will be starting with a very straightforward process of having the community raise questions or issues with the method, assessing these issues in an open forum, and then making a decision on the resolution. Now, Sally pointed out a couple different types of resolutions we could come to, and I believe we may want to anticipate a few more. Next, Court. There's clarification of method and change to the method that Sally mentioned. And I believe we're also going to have to consider agreeing to disagree. Not ideal, perhaps, but I think we need to anticipate this. And I think we also need to anticipate the fact that there are potentially other paths that we'll need to take to address some of these issues. So I think we need to keep an open mind here. Next, please. Now is the $64,000 question, of course. How do we go about making these decisions? Well, as Court mentioned earlier, in this community, authority is derived from valued contributions. So we're going to start with what we've called a small council of recognized contributors. And I think it's important to recognize here that we want to clarify and work toward a good reference here, not a perfect standard. The people that we have tagged, asked, and who have graciously agreed to help us with this are Stephen Miller, Colin Carter, Leon Starr, and Greg Arnott. And I expect that will grow with time. Next, please. So as noted earlier, all members are encouraged to participate in the assessments. Yes, we have to find a council to make final decisions, but we're expecting the entire interested community to be engaged in this. People bring to the party their concerns, their interests, their experience. And let's cull all of those together, and we'll be much stronger and better as a community and a team working on this than individual camps. Next, please. So here are our short-term goals. And these we would like to achieve by October, by the annual conference. First is to agree upon the method's body of knowledge. What forms this at the moment, and how do we want to address this going forward? We want to clarify and refine the general process as needed. How does this team work together? How do we integrate the probably quite lively discussions we have on the topics? And we'd also like to address a couple issues just to vet and refine the process, kind of get the wheels rolling on this. So here's where we are. I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to very active participation. Certainly over the years, I've had many spirited discussions with very animated people on these topics. I hope that continues. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Just a couple of more names to let you know that other people are already streaming into involvement with this particular team. Michael has identified the need for a council that kind of makes the decisions, but Lee Riemenschneider, Ian Wilkie, Levi Starrett have already expressed helping this team with that, either with issues, inputting issues to be addressed, providing opinions on some of the issues, even recording and capturing some of this information. We kind of would like to have a OOA report or some kind of published recording of these decisions. And so there's lots of room for people to help out in different ways. Okay, so Emily's the community team leader, Michael's the OOA team. Thirdly, we have John Wolf, who's accepted leadership to at least kick off a tooling team, and he'll tell us what his charter is and how he plans to go forward.
Thanks, Court. So this is pretty simple, probably even simpler than the OA team's charter. The goal here is to ensure that the tooling is readily accessible. Right now, if you go and you say, well, I want to do Shlaer-Mellor, and I'd like to do it with some automated tools, there's no central place to go to answer the question, well, which tools are available? So we want to solve that problem and make it really clear. Here's an enumeration of the tools that will work. And then we want to characterize those tools. And while we're doing this, we'll look for opportunities to advance the language and identify synergy between these two different tool chains. Next. So participation, we expect mainly tool experts and stewards and developers to be part of the team. At the moment, we have Dave Skinner, who will represent the xtUML side, as he's an expert in that tool chain, and I've never dealt with that particular tool chain. And we'll also have Leon Starr masquerading as Andrew Mangonia, so that together we'll have expertise in the models to code, or what we call the model realization tool chain that's represented in that models to code book that Andrew and Leon and Stephen wrote. I actually do have some experience with that tool chain, and then I'll represent the Bridgepoint side because I have more experience with that tool chain than all the others. Short-term goals for the team. As I said, first we want to enumerate the tool chains and where you can find them. And then we want to characterize them. Right now, the tool chains that are available to practice Shlaer-Mellor are quite different, and making a decision about which one might work for your organization is probably not all that easy. And so we want to ease that process, that selection process, by providing a characterization of each of these tool chains. So one of our first tasks will be to agree on what the schema is for that characterization, and then get the existing tool chains properly characterized and pointers to where you can go get these tools and install them, that sort of thing, listed in some central spot. We will also continue opening and prioritizing top tier language issues. If you have a look at the OOA book issue repository right now, there are a number of issues that we've already opened. And so we'll need to spend some time understanding those and prioritizing them so that the OOA team knows which ones it ought to get to work on for those 2 or 3 that they want to try to address before October, to try to vet their processes. And then finally, we hope to brainstorm some opportunities for synergy between the tools. Having worked with both Bridgepoint a lot and the model realization tools a bit, I've already seen some opportunities there. And so I'm looking forward to just, getting together with the people who understand all 3 of these chains and any other chains that get identified and enumerated to look and see if there are good opportunities for synergy. One that comes to mind is in the model realization tool chain. There is some brilliant work that Andrew did to make it really easy to generate a sequence diagram from an execution scenario. So, go run a test case against your application model and then look at the generated sequence diagram. That's something that we could very easily integrate into Bridgepoint. We could integrate it into pretty much any tool chain because of the way it's architected. That's just an example of the kind of synergy we want to look for, identify, and make people aware. That I expect a good number of, wait, you have that? Can I borrow that? Kinds of discussions between these tool developers and stewards. That's all I have. Questions?
John,
Just
Mike here?
not so much question, but just, you know, a little add on to that. So yeah, so I'm sort of somewhat of a proxy for Andrew, you know, but I think that over time, as this develops, I don't think we'll have much difficulty enticing, my personal opinion is we won't have much difficulty enticing him to get involved. I think the best trick is simply misrepresent his tool set, and that should get his attention. That's
Between the two of us, we
not
should be
seriously recommending that, but yeah. But the thing I really want to point out is that Melanie, who's, you know, I can see is attending quietly there, has a lot of hands-on experience, especially over the last year or two with Andrew's, you know, tool set. And so I would definitely, you know, I think I don't want to speak for her in terms of involvement, but I think she would be a really good resource. Yeah, probably a much better resource than me in most respects with regard to, you know, how all that stuff works and the features and so forth. So that's pretty much all I was going to add.
Hi, guys.
There she is.
Hey,
There
Mike.
she is. Hey there.
Mike, you were chiming in there, I think.
Yeah, I was going to comment on John's point of opening and prioritizing the top tier language issues. I thought we were going to choose the easiest ones first, John.
No,
Damn.
sorry. Remember the cost of putting me in this role.
Touche.
Okay, thanks, John. And gosh, and I'll give credit to Michael for pushing us to establish some short-term goals. I'll take credit for trying to keep those short-term goals scoped such that we hit them. But considering where we were 2 months ago with just kind of expressing a desire to more formalize the community to where we are now, establishing goals for the end of October, and we'll get a report. We'll make sure that we have a report at the xtUML Days conference, just a short update on the advancement of the community and the achievements of the teams that they've made in a very short period of time. And there's nothing that breeds interest than a little bit of success. And so hitting some goals is going to cause other people to say, that looks like fun, and I want to be part of that. And joining in with our community here. And so
actually, can I just, relevant to that point, Court?
Yes.
Recent developments, you know, really indicate the need for this. I did a big presentation yesterday morning on a tour de force of the whole modeling approach applied to autonomous driving, to the autonomous driving and functional safety community. And I've got another open source thing that's happening where we're open sourcing those very models over the next couple of months. And the immediate question I get from the community, and this was a direct question after my talk the other morning, is there some sort of open reference on this method that you're using? You know, and where do I go for that? And of course, and you know, what I had to say is, well, it's coming together, right? There's a serious effort to coalesce all the information, but at present, it's kind of scattered around. And then I immediately said, but hey, if you want a quick introduction, you can, I plugged my book. So we got to do better than that, of course. So, so there is a real emerging interest out there that is going to be directed to this. And right now it might be light little pings, but I can tell you my LinkedIn's blowing up. And I haven't even put the video up for everybody to see. It's just been a smaller number of people, but I'm getting a lot of people reaching out to me, and this is gonna, I'm gonna be continually pinged with this, is where is it? So I'm gonna direct some of this to the conference coming up, maybe we'll get some more membership out of that. Yeah, so there's some urgency here, and I have a definite self-interest in seeing this come together. So, but I just thought I would throw that out there.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate the motivation. Okay, so we're at the end of the material. Let us, wow, and we almost used the hour. Like last time, let's take about a 3-minute break here. And so my phone says 10:53, and when it says 10:56, I'm going to just have open question and answer. But yeah, let me just leave it open and question and answer, preferably with questions relevant to the presentations that have been made here, but it'll be open. So go get some coffee. If you need to leave and go to another meeting, you've seen the material. I'm actually going to keep the recording going, and we'll publish that with the minutes. But please have your questions ready for discussion here 3 minutes from now. Actually, 2.5 minutes from now. Okay, we're back. Let me open the floor to questions, related to, how, what's happened over the last couple of months, or interest in future directions, or whatever you want. And we'll limit it to at most to an hour, but when I feel that we're kind of getting to the end of the usefulness, then I will fairly unilaterally and arbitrarily call our meeting to a close.
That might be soon.
Yeah.
Well,
let me jump in and offer up something that I think
Emily had asked me about, library of things that we have and found. And I was on a call yesterday. I was talking with Mike one-on-one, and he said, boy, I really wish I had the action semantics, from the OMG. Well, guess what? I had a copy of that. So what I'm doing is I'm putting together right now, just a Dropbox that contains everything that, kind of I have that is not copyrighted. Okay, so for example, I'd love to put a PDF of the book in there, of the executable UML book, or PDFs of other people's books that I have. Don't want to do that because I want to be careful about distribution. But if you are interested in subscribing to this Dropbox, either because you think you have something and you can contribute, or because you just want to see what we've got, let me know, and I will, make that available for everybody. It's probably not the most organized structure, but let's go ahead and see what we have, and then we can put that together. I mean, some of this goes back to like 1984 papers on the project matrix that were just physically I've just physically scanned in, but at least to get started with a reference.
Great, Mark, thanks.
And when we start accumulating caches of existing literature and information, I think that we, even those of us who have visibility into several of the caches already, I think even those people are going to be surprised at just how much existing literature there is. And it'll be nice to be able to put our hands on it, especially as these teams are having discussions. I know, for example, in my discussions with Ian and Colin, I'll have had some question about the method that I've had for 10 years. And one of those guys will say, oh, well, we actually have a paper on that. And we had that discussion with, a particular client modeling community at some point in the past, and had at least addressed it to some level. And so it's really nice to not have to start from scratch if some brain power has already been applied and we just didn't know about it.
Oh, and one more thing. I am continuing to pursue people at Addison Wesley about making the executable UML book either reverting the copyright, because some of you have expressed, that you have not been able to purchase copies of it, and or to get an electronic version going of the book, and possibly even to rework it with more up-to-date models, action languages, and so forth. So I've kind of put all of those feelers out there, and it's just a matter of, Addison Wesley got bought, and somebody got bought, and somebody got bought, but I found somebody who had actually retired, who said, well, try the following 10 people, and maybe one of them will respond. So, by the way, if any of you have inside track to people at Addison Wesley or Pearson, let me know.
If I could pick up on the documentation aspect and the librarianship, Mark and I have not had a chance to talk, but certainly one of the things that feels really important to me going forward, especially for people that we managed to persuade to join the community, is navigating through this massive material. It is a lot of material. And so simple things like tagging, getting the names right, and just being able to list things by date would be really quite important. At the moment, I'm doing it in a blooming Excel spreadsheet. Maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but actually it works. So my ambition, Mark, would be to do something a little bit more tech savvy than that.
Yeah, I think the idea is once we have, and I think you've already, begun to look at the problem as well. I think if we can evolve it as opposed to waiting until we get the perfect solution, I think that would be a good start.
Ian says that he's planning to gather together all of their public documents as well. So
Yeah.
I imagine he'll coordinate with you and you guys can work out where to put them all.
Yeah, and if somebody has a trove of paper and says, I don't want to scan this trove of paper, I'll give you my address and I'll be happy to, put something to bear, or someone on that task. So, because I know that a lot of the stuff that we had, pre, 1998, 99, may have been electronic, but the only version that was ever saved of it was a paper version.
In addition to all this archive material, one thing that I'm getting a little excited about is that I'm also finding people doing active research on the method. Just in the process of looking around, I found a couple papers, one by Paul Hyam on threads of control, fascinating piece of work. And Andrew Mangonia is working on a bridges paper, very, very early, trying to establish vocabulary. And I expect there's more of this going on in the community that we may be aware of. And I think it'll be great to pull some of the current stuff that's going on out and making it accessible and providing actually a forum for these things to be developed. At the moment, they appear to be in these little isolated pockets of practitioners who over the years have developed a group of people they could say, well, here, I'm thinking about it this way. What do you think? I think we're going to have an interesting infusion of new and current stuff as well.
Yeah, and we'll be able to compare the new with some of the heritage writings or some archived writing that we didn't know about. Greg, I haven't heard much from you. Just can you give me just a general sense of do you like Leon said, he jumped in and said, hey, I like what I see here. Are you liking what you see? And represent your team a little bit as well.
So it looks really good. I mean, there are some obviously questions hanging over from the past that need to be answered with regarding the method. And certainly things that we're interested in at the moment is how we can improve our bridges. We've got some work going on around async API and also code generating things based on signatures coming out of domain and using that information along with a sequence diagram to determine how we can just directly code generate. We have had in the past lots of action language written in bridges where there's been a lot of manipulation, and what we want to do is we want to avoid that. So that's one thing that we are looking at. The other thing that we're interested in is we're interested in threaded control with respect to cloud computing and function as a service or software as a service, and what that means to the method. Certainly how that differs from how we have used the method over the last 20 or so years.
Okay, so I mean, that's nuts and bolts, active development where maybe discussions from these teams are going to, help a team that's actually in flight with work underway. Alan, I see your name. I don't know if you left to go get coffee and didn't come back, but I'll go ahead and ask the question in case you're there. Do you like what you see?
Yes.
I like
I congratulate you on finding a bunch of very capable and willing volunteers, Court. You know the thoughts I shared with yourself and Rob, which were copied to Mike. For this to work, there's going to have to be a significant ramping up of energy levels. Most people have day jobs. Not all of us have retired yet. And I understand your desire for an infusion of young talent into the community. But we will have to, he said, sitting back, sipping his coffee, up our energy levels somewhat to deliver a lot of progress. While you've drawn me into the conversation, I'll just raise one point, if I may, with John and tooling. You'll know that I raised the issue of making it viable to do Shlaer-Mellor xtUML and on all that with mainstream tools. So John, do you plan to have a focus for looking at, to pick a concrete example, how to do Shlaer-Mellor with Enterprise Architect? These are the buttons you need to push an Enterprise Architect to get the job done properly. Is that an idea that appeals to you?
It's a great question. The team itself will be composed of people who have done that and made it work. And so if there's a crew out there who have actually successfully practiced Shlaer-Mellor with Enterprise Architect or Rhapsody, and they have an interest in participating and characterizing that tool set and explaining to people, which pieces to go pick up, how to put them together, and how to make it all work. Absolutely, we are completely open to that. If you're asking me personally, am I going to go work that out? Absolutely not. I've never done it. Sure. I have no experience in it, and so but if there's somebody out there who has done it, yes, bring them on. We want that kind of participation, and we want to make this as open and wide and broad as possible.
Okay, now I know that, thanks John for that response, and I hope that someone with some in-depth of experience on Enterprise Architect or similar will be able to step forward on that. I know Ian has advised us that he can't talk much at the present moment, but given that IUML is effectively a legacy product, is there any value in devoting effort to looking at IUML as part of a tool chain at all?
Well, so my perspective is that that idiom, the dialect, is really important because there's 20 plus years times however big that particular team is worth of experience of industrial use on IUML. And so the bulk of the IUML users now have been transitioned to Bridgepoint, but that's just the part of the tool chain. And honestly, I don't have a great deal of experience in that IUML, ASL, and MASL idiom. And so what we want to do is characterize that side of the Bridgepoint chain and help people understand, for example, if you're new to the method and you say, this all sounds great, I want to pick one of these tool chains, what's available? Well, it could be argued that there are really kind of three different flavors of Bridgepoint available to you. There's the traditional Bridgepoint available in OAL. There is the emerging one that supports ASL. And now there is one that also supports MASL. And so it would be really helpful for people to understand those three different dialects and be given assistance in making the decision about which one of those dialects they want to pursue. So that's my interest in IUML, and I'm certainly open to other input.
Yeah, let me first of all correct. I'm not sure that the bulk of IUML users have transitioned to Bridgepoint, but there are a few that have begun. But your point that the spirit of IUML lives on is true. First of all, in those that are continuing to use the tool even with the maintenance situation. But that dialect is distinct. And even as it exists in the Bridgepoint tool, it's a problem right now that you must choose your idiom and stay within your idiom. And it's pretty easy inside a tool that is supporting both to kind of intermix them and cause yourself problems. And so, one way or another, the IUML, the Kennedy-Carter dialect of the method is going to continue to exist for the foreseeable future and needs to be documented and clarified.
Yep, no disagreement there, Court. And although that rather falls into Mike's remit to a degree. But otherwise, in summary, I'm extremely supportive, and I'll be more than happy to contribute and respond to requests to contribute if anyone thinks I can add value.
Okay, yeah, you'll end up being recruited. Okay, so there's just one other person here. Dennis, do you want to say anything before I call the meeting to a close here?
No, I thought it was all very informative. So I'm more like a sponge today.
Yeah, well, and you're a cooperative and willing lad anyway. You're usually pretty happy with people's efforts. Okay.
Good job there.
Rob, do you have a point?
Yeah. I noticed that Clive from Australia hasn't made it to today's session, which is, I think, unfortunate. He and I were communicating, and I set up a trial version of Open Moodle as a way to get some movement on having infrastructure in place. I ran out of time, energy, and money because I had to buy a license to make that really happen. But Clive had a lot of things to say, which I now can't access because I never paid the license fee. But I think there's a lot about infrastructure that will bubble up fairly quickly as we get this thing going. But I don't want to say anything more today.
Okay, I agree with that, and I also I don't know if you were actually saying it, but I'll say it for you that even though Clive is absent in this meeting at the moment, he has been fairly intimately connected with these communications. He has visibility to what's happening. He works closely with John and another gentleman named Alistair, who are actively practitioners as in Shlaer-Mellor modeling, and Clive, I think, is modeling every day and has clients and customers. So he's motivated, and he lives several time zones across, but he's going to be an active participant in this community, I'm sure. Okay, I appreciate everybody's time, attention, and participation. We now have concrete plans and goals. Those who don't have specific tasks assigned to them, are encouraged to offer to assist with whichever team it seems to make the most sense. I will schedule another one of these meetings between now and the conference, probably just one more between now and the conference. And then I definitely encourage people to do what you can to help us have a successful xtUML days on October 27th. Okay, thanks again, and bye everybody. And especially thanks to my team members who've worked very hard.
Yeah, thanks, Court. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.